This is the Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast, a show that brings you marketing stories, tips, hints, and much more. A treat for those who want to succeed in business or marketers who just want to learn. Hello, Alex.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
I'm super excited to have on our podcast today David Perry, who I have been passing each other on the networking circuit for a couple of years now.
It's got to be at least that, hasn't it? And possibly with COVID time in between, it might have been even longer.
That's true. So, David, introduce yourself to Alex, to our audience. What do you do?
I'm David Perry, and for the last 15 years, I've been working with smaller businesses to provide video production services. I've worked with all sorts of different businesses in that time on a variety of different video projects. But now I mainly work on learning and development and internal communications projects. That's one side of the business. The other side, which has been bubbling away quietly and is hopefully going to burst onto the market this year, is going to be around live events, bringing live events to an online audience.
Oh, like a hybrid situation.
Yeah. Comes in many different shapes and sizes, but it's essentially about being able to extend in-person events beyond the room to the online audience beyond. Because there are all sorts of people who would like to come to in-person events but can't for one reason or another. And I think many event organizers either would like to tap into that audience but aren't quite sure about how to go about it, or maybe can't quite see that their in-person event could be slightly adapted to serve that online audience. And perhaps don't want to get involved with that. And I think they're missing a trick there, because there are people who would like to come but can't come for all sorts of different reasons. Could be financial, could be that they don't have the time to travel from far away, could be they're not able to travel. There are people with caring responsibilities. They can't take the day away from looking after their kids or looking after elderly parents. And of course, there are people with health issues that mean that it's very difficult for them to travel. So I think there's quite a strong accessibility aspect to this, about being able to make those events more open and easier for people who can't travel there in person.
Oh, I love that actually. And you forgot there's a new one that I'm learning is pets, right? People can't always leave their pets. It's
Yes.
become a big part of my life, more than my kids now. I'm happy to leave the kids. I can't leave the pets.
That is true.
Pets and your kids.
Yeah, that is true. Yes, our pets, our dogs, are probably more of a liability than our children ever were.
Well, because children at least learn how to feed themselves at some point, right? Pets never do.
Well, actually, in one of our dog's cases, it's stopping him from feeding himself. It's keeping him out of the cupboards where
Either way, it's one of the extremes. Either they don't eat or they eat everything, including the sofa.
Yes, that's about the size of it. Yes.
Alex is a cat person, not a dog person. So.
Right. Yes. My one of my sons is definitely a cat person. He likes the low maintenance aspect.
I mean, I would say I was actually both. I would say.
No, I agree. But in terms of maintenance, it's definitely cat for you.
Maybe.
It's going to surprise me now and say, Erica, I got a puppy over the weekend. Awesome. Well, the other reason I love that is, so my mom lives in South Africa, but a lot of our family is in Australia. And recently she's been attending a lot of weddings and funerals virtually.
Mm.
And it's been so refreshing for her. And I think this started during COVID, right? When they had rules around how many people were allowed, etc. And some of the churches, etc., have continued that. And it's been so wonderful for my mom, because it means she can be part of it, as because you can't afford a flight ticket to Australia every. So she's obviously at the age where there's quite a few of those happening now. So that's been really good. So that's another aspect that I love that, David. It really does open the world, right? So let's talk about video a little bit. And I'm one of those people who hates myself on video. David, what is your advice for someone like me?
There are two things I think you can do about that. The first is to practice and to do more of it, to force yourself, because the more you do, the more comfortable you'll feel. The more comfortable you feel, the better you will come across on camera. And so you'll be happier with the way that you look. But that takes time, and you have to be able to push through that initial disinclination. Everybody feels exactly the same. Nobody likes the way they look on camera. Nobody likes the way they sound when they hear their voice being played back. The other thing to do is to look at how you can use video in a different way that doesn't involve you being on camera. This video is a tool that can be used in all sorts of different ways. And again, it comes back to what you're trying to achieve for your business or for your organization. It may well be that you can use video in a completely different way that involves, for instance, doing pieces to camera with your clients. You can do lots of B-roll shots of projects that you're involved in. You can use animation, and you can use things with graphics, or you can do voiceovers. There are lots of different techniques that you can adopt that don't involve you looking down the lens of a camera trying to sound natural, because that's very, very hard. The people who can do that and seem very natural possibly have a bit of talent, but also have practiced a great deal.
Yeah.
I think people practice more often than they say they do. If someone's good on the camera, they probably practiced at least in front of the mirror every single morning.
Very much so. And they've probably done an awful lot that they've looked at and gone, ugh, and thrown away. I mean, that's a part of the practicing is not setting yourself too high a bar initially, and just think, I'm going to have a go at this. And if I don't like the look of it, I'll press delete and I won't use that. And then you can have another go, maybe that day or maybe another day. And gradually you will find a style and a way of delivery that you're comfortable with. And once you're comfortable and you're feeling reasonably happy, or as happy as you can be in an unnatural situation, then that will come across on camera and you will look more like your natural self. Because in the end, what you're really trying to do, if you're doing pieces of video like this, is just to give people an impression of what you're going to be like when and if they meet you in person.
It's funny because we're on the camera every day now, like now.
Mm.
But somehow once you sit down and someone says, right, we're ready to go, and say your piece, and you've got 30 seconds, it's a completely different ball game to having a online video call with somebody.
Because you feel like you need to perform. And that comes naturally to some people. They love it. They love the spotlight being pointed at them. Other people, it's the worst thing you could possibly ask them to do. And in that case, it's not so much about being on camera, it's more about feeling the attention on them. They would, people who feel uncomfortable doing that would feel equally uncomfortable about being made to stand up in a meeting and do their 30 seconds. It's their toes curl and they want to go away and hide. So, again, it comes when you're looking at using video is don't try and force yourself to do something that you don't want to do. Yeah.
So Alex and I were both quite heavily involved in TV production, and I'm wondering whether a lot of my reluctance is not from that, because from the other side, I was quite dictatorial about what I wanted, what the set would look like, even what the actors wore. I was involved in choosing the actors. Alex knows there was a particular shirt that I was quite passionate about because I knew they looked good in that shirt. So that was the shirt that had to be worn. And And then we made them repeat, right? Repeat, repeat, repeat. I mean, to be honest, they were talking Polish and Czech and Slovakian, so I didn't really understand what they were saying. So maybe that would have made it worse. So I guess when the camera is pointed at me, all of that is going through my head, right?
And again, it comes back to what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a very polished, tightly edited TV program, then you have to go about things in a different way than if you're trying to record something that's a bit more naturalistic, a bit more informal, a bit more relaxed. It doesn't mean that you can get away with being sloppy. One of the things that annoys me intensely is the people who say, "Oh, I never edit anything. You know, it's all about keeping it real, man." And I'm like, no, you're not editing stuff because you're too lazy. Let's not beat around the bush here. You know, what you're doing by saying, "Oh, it's going to be rough and authentic." Yeah, what you're doing is you're essentially offloading the responsibility for picking the nuggets out of your stream of consciousness to your audience because you can't be bothered. Let's call it out how it is.
I love that.
But the degree to which you need to do that will vary according to what it is that you're trying to do. And sometimes that work can purely be the upfront preparation. And you by carefully working out what it is that you want to do and the way you want to steer a conversation, roughly what you'd like to come out of this at the end, then it doesn't need editing because you've done your homework, you know, in the hands of a skilled interviewer. The interviewee will deliver the kinds of things that the interviewer wants, and you'll come to the end of your 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and say, that's absolutely fine. Live radio doesn't get edited. Live TV doesn't get edited. But that doesn't mean that people roll into a radio studio to do a 2-hour show with no idea whatsoever about what they're going to do in those 2 hours. To some extent, they will have planned out a level of structure, a level of running order. It might swap around during that time, but they don't just walk in and go, let's talk about something. I don't know. What are we going to talk about? Because otherwise it is going to sound like the worst kind of podcast where, you know, it's me and my buddies shooting the breeze. Well, I'm sure you had a great deal of fun making that, but I'm not sure it's too interesting for the rest of us.
I have seen more of a trend though going in a focus around personal brand alongside the company's brand. So I mean, there's obviously some big examples of that, like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, for example. They're coming out from behind the company screen and showing their personal brand, which they're using to elevate their own company as well. And the content is different. It's moving away from the heavily edited corporate speak to sort of long form. But you're right. I mean, the editing happens behind the scenes before the show. It's the structure of it, but the output comes across as a long form, unedited, off the cuff kind of conversation, or which is a strategy to make people believe that they're watching somebody who is being real, and so it gives the audience the power to make their decision on whether they like the person or not.
Yes.
You know,
yeah,
and I think that's a nice little a new trend that we're seeing as well.
It definitely plays into making an emotional connection, which is what video is very good at, and podcasts, you know, audio only podcasts come to that. It builds a connection between participants and the audience, and the audience can form their own opinions about what they think about the presenters. I would definitely say that on those more corporate ones, there's probably a wee bit more editing going on behind the scenes than might immediately be obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And scripting.
Yeah, maybe not scripting in the traditional sense, but in terms
There's definitely a PR person there going,
yes,
don't say these things.
Yeah, but there'll be some lines to take, as the politicians term it in this country. And there'll be a flow planned out. So it's not scripted in the sense that there are actual lines and
No,
words,
agreed.
but there are phrases and messages that they want to seed across. But the other thing, of course, is if it's a multi-camera piece where you can cut around between different angles, every time you cut between one camera and another, that's an edit point. That's an edit opportunity.
Of course, yeah. And you have no idea what's been cut out at that point.
Yeah, you have no idea what was there before an editor went, oh, let's just fill it that. Not to be misleading, but just because the topic veered off at a tangent that wasn't actually very interesting, or people lost their way, or there was just too much of it. Sometimes, it comes back to, what does the audience want? A certain part of your audience might be ready, willing, and able to spend 30 minutes, 60 minutes more listening to a relatively rambly conversation, because they're that into you. They want to hear this stuff, and they've got the time and the space to do it. Other people maybe aren't that bought in to this particular person. They're kind of interested, but give me the short form. Don't expect me to listen to an hour or more of conversation and pick the bits out of it. I haven't got time. Give me a 15-minute summary. So again, it's about your audience, and what they want, as much as it's about what you want to say to them.
I always find those very, very interesting, the short form versions of the long form, because let's say you have a politician or someone who's done a long form interview, and then you get the highlights on BBC or Sky or CBN or something. Depending on that news outlet, the short form can be very, very different. And the message that you're getting from that person, it could be almost like night and day.
Mm.
And that's the really, really interesting thing about the editing versus the non-edited one. The bias that goes into an edit is incredible.
Yeah, an editor has an awful lot of power and responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
To not put words in people's mouths, but to create a tone, and maybe a slant. One of the things I struggled with when I first started editing, particularly interviews, was that I worried about taking out phrases, because people would say, I worried that people would say, well, you took out this and you took out that. One of the things that I quickly worked out is that actually most people have no idea what it was that they said. They basically won't remember what they talked about. And in fact, they're more likely to say, well, you made me look really good, didn't you? I came across as sort of really concise and on top of my game. And I thought I was rambling a bit. Well, you did a bit, but no,
Oh, no, that's good. And maybe it's the kind of clients we attract, but a lot of the clients we work with are quite reluctant to be on video. And even when they agree, it can be quite a painful experience. One of our clients, for example, made us practice. So the practice is good, but literally for hours. It was hours and hours and and the opening sentence. Should I start with hi, hello, or should I say how are you? Or like that opening sentence was practiced like 500 times to the point that it got insane. How would you suggest, because some of our audience are marketeers and some of our audience are business owners, how would you suggest that kind? And I don't think that's fear. I think that's perfectionism. Would you agree, Alex? It's not more about getting it perfect rather than.
I always find that there's a fine line between perfectionism and fear. If you're a perfectionist, you're fearful of making a mistake or not coming across as well as you would like to. But I think in this particular case that you're talking about, I know exactly what you're talking about because it's stuck with me for some time. I do think it was a case of he's a bit of like a wordsmith. words with, yeah. So he was always very careful with the words that he used. I think he was very proud of his lexicon.
Mm.
I think in that case it was more about the perfectionist side of it. But yeah.
So you must have examples, David, where you've worked
Yeah,
with people like this. How do you handle that?
it's difficult because everybody they'll come to a situation with their own expectations and their own prejudices, perhaps, and their own previous experience, and you have to take account of that. Sometimes it's just about gently telling people that actually that's not how we're going to do it. It really isn't, because the more they go over it, the less relaxed and less informal they'll
Yeah,
be,
that's
and
exactly what happened.
they're just not going to come across well. But equally, you have to work with the concerns or the fears or whatever it might be. One approach that I take is to have some throwaway questions to start off with, to get away from that issue of I need my opening line to count. Well, actually, do you know what? Your opening line is probably not going to even make it onto this. And so I'll start with some easy questions about tell me, go right back to how did you first get into this industry? You know, what was it that you did at junior school, senior school, college, university to get you into that? Now, I know I'm not interested in that. It's not really relevant, except at a very third level remove. But what it does do is get people comfortable about talking.
Yeah.
They're talking about themselves, easiest thing in the world. And so they'll start chatting. And once they get going, they tend to relax a little bit and they're less concerned about getting the precise words and the precise sentences and phrases and their key messages in all the right order. And they just chill out a bit. And so I'll do all of that first, and then 5 minutes in, we'll gently then get into the bits that I particularly want to cover. So that's one way of doing it.
Oh, that's great.
Sometimes I'll ask a question because when you're interviewing, you're not really asking people to find out stuff. You're mainly asking them questions to prompt them to say the words that you need for that piece of video content. If they're not really giving me the answer I want, I'll ask the question again. So interesting. But what I was really driving at was more your thoughts on, and then I'll be quite specific. And they'll say, "Oh, okay," and then we'll go again. Sometimes if you think they've actually relaxed quite a bit through the process, but maybe the first couple of questions that you wanted from them, even though it wasn't the first two questions you started talking about, you think, actually, if only we could do that, I'll put them on at the end. I'll ask them again. So right at the beginning, I did ask you about this, and I'm not sure we quite got your point. So can I just ask you that question again? And by then, they're practically like this, in the chair. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, I never really thought about the role as the production guy. If you're, I guess you work mostly by yourself or with the team, or
A
I,
lot
I
of
guess.
a lot of it's single crewed, yes.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I didn't really think about the aspect of you also having to be a journalist.
Mm.
Because I mean the camera setup is one thing, but then to have the journalistic instinct or know-how is a completely different skill set.
Yeah. It's again, it comes back to what do you want to end up with? Sometimes I say to people, actually, it's we don't begin at the beginning and then go on. We actually begin at the end. What's the end product that we want to have to put in front of the audience? And what we then need to do is track back from that to decide how best to achieve that end goal, given the participants and the locations and the time and the money that we have available. Um, so I'm always thinking because I I'm involved at every stage of the process with most of the projects that I work in. Not every project, but a lot of the projects. I am, pre-production planner, camera op,
Mm.
director on site, and editor. by having a view of what it is that I want to end up with, I'm imagining how things are going to go together in the final edit. So I'm then making sure that when we're shooting, I've actually got what I need to deliver that end product. And it might be that we would go about it differently than people might expect. So we're not necessarily going to go in the order that it's going to end up in the final film.
Like a Quentin Tarantino movie. It
Yeah,
starts at the end, then the beginning, and then finishes with the middle.
yeah, yeah. Might well be. You don't have to start with "Hi, I'm so and so." In fact, I not do that. Cold opens are much more effective. You might start with a shot of whoever it is walking through the location that you're shooting in, whether it's their office and a bit of a voiceover that starts off with something like them saying, "Yeah, every day I come to work and I'm excited by the challenges that we're going to have." Okay, that's a bit cliched, but something like that. And you show a shot of them walking through there, saying hello to people, as they walk through the office.
I think our opening video, Alex, should be me riding a giraffe.
Oh,
I think that
perfect.
would be
Yeah,
fantastic, right?
yeah.
Might have a few activists coming knocking on our door saying
I'm
you
not
shouldn't.
eating the giraffe. I'm just riding it.
And so, yeah, even if it's then going to be mainly an interview-based piece, you have that bit first as a sort of scene setter, and then maybe you cut to the person sitting in a boardroom or wherever it might be, and then you get into the actual interview piece. So you
You're,
don't need a "Hi, I'm so and so, and I've been working here 58 years," because you've captured the essence of what you want to talk about first, and then you can lead into it in a different way.
the trend I've seen in a lot of the Netflix documentaries now is when they have the camera rolling and then the interviewee walks onto set, sits down, plays with the microphone, and says, "Am I okay like this?"
Yeah,
And the camera person says, "Yeah, yeah, you're good like that." And then it cuts to a B-roll for like a few seconds or something else, and then it comes back to that interview. So it's
yeah,
already introduced the interviewee
yeah.
uh, in a very informal manner.
That's okay as long as it's not overused. Like all of these devices.
It's becoming very overused now. I mean, you
Yeah.
see that in almost all of the Netflix documentaries these days.
You see, I bet you haven't seen anyone riding a giraffe.
I
I,
never have.
I almost guaranteed that. Yeah,
That would be a first.
Okay, we got to do it.
we could make it happen.
I think there's a giraffe up.
I think maybe we just need to dress up our very tall friend Mikkel in a giraffe
In
suit,
a
and then
giraffe suit.
and you can and you can give you a piggyback.
No, I'm a perfectionist. Has to be the real thing. But you made me think about captions, David. Because I guess instead of me or the interviewee saying, "I am Erica," whatever, you could just caption it, right? Like Erica Mackay and the title, and so the person never has to say it. How do you, and I know captions generally in video are good because not everyone has the sound on when videos are playing, etc. But I get really annoyed with the AI generated ones where you can just see straight away that someone hasn't even taken the time to check it and there's spelling errors or mistakes or that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts around captions?
Um, so I agree with. So I differentiate between having things like what are known in the trade as lower thirds because they go in the lower third of the screen,
Okay.
with names and job titles. Absolutely, if you can put that in instead of having to have somebody say it because what they're saying is more interesting than do that. Captions, as in the dialogue, definitely for anything that's going to go on social media because pick a number out of the air, but 80% or more of people watching social media videos are likely not to have the sound turned up, either because they're in a situation where they can't have sound playing or because they're doing something else. or they're listening to something else and they're scrolling on their phone, or there's a conversation going on around them. So that's,
or they're in a Zoom meeting and they're watching a video at the same time.
Surely, sorry, no, surely that would never happen. Yeah. So, but you are right that people then will become lazy and they'll use the automatic transcription, which is incredibly good.
It's getting better, right?
Compared to how it was even 2 or 3 years ago, the accuracy has really, really come on a great deal. But to use a phrase that I heard someone use the other day, AI should be your co-pilot, not your autopilot.
Yeah.
So
I love that actually.
I stole it from somewhere else, so feel free to make use.
You just keep stealing it. I like it.
Yeah. Stealing ideas with confidence, as someone else said to me once. So yeah, it'll do 80-90% of the job for you, but that's not an excuse for them not going around and just doing the final corrections, making sure that it's picked up the right there, or the right two. But also that you haven't got any outrageously embarrassing misinterpretations, particularly when you have people with strong accents.
Yeah, I was going to say I've done quite a few podcasts, and the majority in another with another company, and a lot of the guests that we have on the podcasts, because it's a worldwide business, are either usually speaking English as a second language, and the tools that we're using in the editing for the AI subtitles, they're sometimes very hard to pick up the words correctly, and you really do have to go through them literally one by one and checking them. Although that is much quicker than typing it still.
Yes, and the other thing that the automatically generated subtitles do is that they put them in the right place. So if you have to do the whole thing manually, when in the old days when you did have to do that, it wasn't just about retyping the dialogue. It was also then about dividing that into sections and putting it in the right place on the video so that the right sentence came up at the right place. So automatic transcription is a huge time saver, and it'll do the bulk of the work for you, but not all of it. Big fan, but do your share of the work too.
Yeah, and I do want to encourage people, just do that check, even if it's 5 minutes, just do the check, because I think it stops people in their tracks straight away if they see a mistake. And then they've stopped listening, right? Then it's over because they're totally distracted by this. That was wrong. And your brain just gets stuck there, right? It doesn't. And so you've lost your audience just because you didn't take 5 minutes to just do a little check.
And that's true, I think, for most aspects of video production. Your production needs to be good enough that it doesn't detract from what you're trying to, or the messages you're trying to get across. So you don't need to have perfection in lighting. You don't need to have every tiny bit of background noise eradicated, but you need to do enough there to maintain people's concentration on what's going on, what the content is saying, because immediately you have something like an incorrect interpretation on a subtitle, or a loud noise that you can't place. The audience will start thinking about that rather than paying attention to what's being seen and heard on screen. And as you say, once you've lost their attention, you may never get it back, or you may take some time to get it back.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for this interesting chat. I think we could probably keep talking about this forever, right? All the pros and cons of video. I think I'm going to use this episode as my push. I need to get over whether it's my fear or my perfectionism. And Alex has been telling me that for years, actually. But I just freeze, right? So I think that's my little push. I'm going to find a giraffe. That's going to be my video.
I think so. Find a friend to work with, because it's really difficult doing the stuff by yourself, and think about different approaches, different formats, different styles that maybe will just break that log jam and you'll feel more comfortable about.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Any last tips you want to share with the audience, or if someone needs help or wants to work with you, how can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, is probably the best way, or email me, david@davidperrymedia.com. I'm always happy to have a chat with people, explore ideas, and make some suggestions. So feel free to get in touch.
Fantastic. Your last golden tip?
My last golden tip is, it is all about you, but even more than that, it's all about the audience. So never forget who is going to be watching your content, and give them a reason to start watching, give them a reason to keep on watching.
Perfect. Alex, your big takeaway today?
I'm gonna steal the AI as your co-pilot, not the not the autopilot. I think that's brilliant. And I think also when I'm back in town, Erica, let's organize a night to go and rob a giraffe from London Zoo.
Okay, that part we'll edit out. If there's any police watching, he's joking. He's joking. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. It's been really good. And Alex, I'll see you next time.
That wraps up this episode of Giraffes Don't Eat Steak. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found value in our discussion and got some new ideas to apply to your own business. Tune in next week for another round of marketing insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate you listening. Catch you next time on Giraffes Don't Eat Steak.